Tish, are we good? I'm sorry. I should check with the boss
Yeah,
before I call
we're good.
order.
6:01.
Okay. Today's Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. I call the attendance call to order pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 on March 29th, 2023. Governor Maura Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations for certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. This January 22nd, 2025 select board meeting will be conducted via remote participation by the select board. The chair will grant permission to Westwood Media to record. And Charlotte, I think you guys might be live streaming it too, and to anyone else who wishes to record the meeting. Chair's update, just two quick updates. One is the Charter Review Committee. Kudos to them. They have holding some information sessions, in-person sessions at the main library on High Street, January 25th and February 8th. Residents are encouraged to stop by the Westwood Main Library on those dates, the 25th of February 8th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., where members of the Charter Review Committee will be available to answer any questions or provide any information on the Westwood Charter Review. And the chair's second update is another public service announcement. The next Fire Station 1 Community Forum Public Information Session will be held on February 4th, 2025, 6 p.m. at the main library. Please join the FS1 working group and town staff to hear more about the Main Street Fire Station construction project. And a shout out to Todd Corchin and his crew for an excellent job cleaning the streets during this past storm. They were out bright and early pre-treating the streets and clearing the streets, and they did an outstanding job. So thanks, Todd. Appreciate it. And I'll turn that over to our town administrator extraordinaire, Chris Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One update, as you may recall, when we had an article, the MBTA zoning at the annual town meeting, we talked about how the state could withhold certain grants from the Commonwealth, from different communities who do not. Now, there was a case. The case was heard at the SJC. They identified certain things with that, but just as a point of an example of what we're dealing with, and the fortunate that we are, the position that we're in with the successful passage at the annual town meeting, Chief Lund received some information from the state regarding a grant that the department has historically applied for and has, unfortunately enough, has been receiving. That's the firefighter safety equipment grant. But there was a notification that the state said this is now subject to the MBTA. I'm paraphrasing, subject to the MBTA zoning. So because the town did pass that, I'm happy to announce to the select board and to the public through Chief Lund and Assistant Chief McCarthy's efforts to apply for this grant, the town will be receiving $11,745.99. We will be looking to put this on a future warrant, a future select board agenda for the board to accept. But I just wanted to give you an example of how the MBTA zoning would have had a negative impact on the town if not passed, or in this case, how the MBTA zoning passage at the annual town meeting is further helping advance the town with grant funding.
Thank you. That's it, Chris?
That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great. Next, we have scheduled action. Westwood Media Center with the Public Educational or Government Agreement, Third Amendment discussion / vote to extend to July 1st, 2025. Town Council Patrick Ahern, Melinda Garfield, and Mike Gay and Patrick French are joining us this evening. And Pat, would you like to take it away?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we've actually reached an agreement with Westwood Media Center on a new PEG agreement for 3 years with a mutual option for a second 3-year term. The deal came together very fast. I think it meets both of our needs. And I think that we have some protection financially at the town, but we also have the ability for Westwood Media Center to continue to deliver services to the community, which the community very much likes. Services like this meeting tonight being broadcast. So I recommend, and Mr. Coleman was part of the negotiations as well, that you agree to the 3-year contract extension. And I think Mr. Gay would like the ability to speak with your permission, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Mike,
Great.
Melinda, Patrick, welcome. Mike, would you like to say a few words?
I would. I first want to thank the select board, Joe, yourself, Marianne, Rob, Chris Coleman, the town administrator, and certainly Pat Ahern, town council, for not only the continued partnership with Westwood Media Center, but also for working so quickly on the contract to provide critical production services to the town of Westwood. While we're really excited to move forward with the 3-year extension before this board tonight, I do want to take this moment to shine a light on a very real challenge that Westwood Media Center faces. As we've discussed before with this board, there's been a material shift in the way all of us consume video programming, with a shift from cable television to streaming services. We've been somewhat fortunate here in Westwood, where the speed at which people have cut the cable has been a little slower than other communities. But unfortunately, it's become a very real threat to the ongoing business model of Westwood Media Center. Since we receive all of our operational and capital funding from Comcast and Verizon based on the cable subscribers' PEG fees, every time a household makes a decision to cut cable, our budget effectively goes down. Rough and tough, about $100 per household per year comes out of the Westwood Media Center budget. We're not coming to the board tonight with any direct asks, but we want to make you aware and the community aware of the current realities that we face. Our hope is to come before this board at an upcoming meeting to dive into the data and work together to look at the possible solutions to help maintain the level of service that the town and the citizens of Westwood have really become accustomed to. With that, we respectfully, as Pat has mentioned, we request that you approve the Westwood Media Center contract extension, and we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Joe, you're on mute.
Marianne, any thoughts or questions?
I saw Rob's hand first, so
Oh,
Rob,
okay.
if you want to go.
Oh, thank you. First of all, just, want to thank Mike and Melinda. I believe you guys are celebrating about 10 years together, right, on leading Westwood Media Center. And I just want to remind folks of what Westwood Media Center, formerly known as WestCat, was before Melinda arrived, because she's given some tremendous leadership and stewardship to the programming and the quality of the service that Westwood Media Center has become in town. So I want to thank you guys for, a decade's worth of service, and obviously become integral to how the public stays abreast of what's going on in town, both on the government side as well as, education and other things around town. So thank you. And, the reality is, in that 10-year period, you guys have seen cord cutting continue, as we've done as much as we can to try and shore you up with getting the Comcast agreement to the 5%. So but look forward to having that future conversation, because recognize that the challenge is very, very real and present. So
Rob, I'll just, I thank you for those comments. The only mistake you made is by putting me in the same category of helping us get here as Melinda. Melinda and her team at Westwood Media Center are phenomenal. The board, we do the easy part. We try to just, come in to make decisions here or there, but I can't thank Melinda and her team enough.
Let me add to that, if I may, to pile on a bit. I also want to thank you, Mike, for the presentation, Melinda and Patrick for being here tonight. And, Rob, I'm glad you covered the history a bit, because I think we take WMC for granted, because they're always there. And what a lot of folks may not see is there are a lot of late nights for the professionals that work at Westwood Media Center. They're the first one at any event and the last one to leave, providing that service, which I think, and I'm sure we can all agree, is vitally important to our good governance in this age of virtual meetings. Allowing people to participate, to watch whenever they have time to do so. It is just so critically important. So, Mike, I'm glad that you did shine a light on the challenges that WMC is facing, and I very much look forward to your coming back so that we can dive into the data and discuss this further.
Thank you, Marianne.
And Melinda and Patrick and Mike, I concur with everything that's been said. Melinda, you got a great team. I love working with the folks there, and you two. You guys do a great job. I am concerned about going forward because, man, we need Westwood Media. It's so, Rob said it. It's so important to the citizens in our town, and you guys do a great job delivering a great service. Mike, my question is, in talking to educators in other towns, it sounds like these media centers are incorporated into the school curriculums. And I know educators who work in TV studios and stuff, and the kids love it. Is there anything along the lines, is that anywhere on your radar or anything along those lines?
No, it's a great question, Joe, and there are definitely examples where different towns similar to Westwood have incorporated their PEG programming, their media centers, into even the high school as an example, where it becomes part of the curriculum, where the studio is right there in the high school. While we're very open and having some conversations with the schools, the location of Westwood Media Center is a big question as we move forward. We're currently at 15 Purwall, which has been a great home for Westwood Media Center. The challenge when you look at our the finances is that it's a pretty big expense on an annual basis. So we've talked with Chris and the town about looking at locations. We'd mentioned the library as a possibility. Certainly the schools would be a phenomenal discussion to have. So we welcome those discussions, and that very well may be part of the conversation that we have when we come back to you in one of the future meetings.
Thank you, Mike. I just can't emphasize enough how much the educators in the other communities I've spoken to just thoroughly enjoy that system, and the kids really enjoy it too. Melinda, you've been conspicuously absent. Is there anything you want? I want to give you a chance before I pass the torch here.
No, thank you so much for, signing the agreement, and thank you for allowing me to serve the community for the last 10 years. It's been really special.
You do a great job. Patrick, anything from your end?
No, I think I just want to, being the newest person involved with WMC and with the select board as the liaison role that I serve, I just want to echo the sentiments around Melinda and her team and the amazing work that they do. And I've gotten to see that even more closely up front and center in my role. And I feel very fortunate to be a part of it. So looking forward to the continued discussions on the future of WMC.
Thank you, Patrick. I did not say at the beginning, but if people would like to speak, please raise your hand and you'll be allowed 2 minutes to speak. And you can also ask questions in the Q&A. And Tish, do we have, I thought I saw something in the Q&A, then it kind of vaporized on me. So do you see anything there, Tish?
No questions right now.
Any questions from the public?
Not that I can see.
Great. Mary Ann, would you care to make a motion?
I would, thank you. I move that the select board approve the contract with Westwood Media Center as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call, Mary Ann?
Aye.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, shoot, go ahead, Pat.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to say, and accepting electronic signatures on the document. Could you add that to your motion, Mary Ann?
I accept that friendly amendment.
And I accept the amended motion.
Shoot, I'm at a loss for words.
Call the roll.
Mary Ann, we'll do it one more
Aye.
time. Rob?
Aye.
I
Aye.
vote aye as well. Unanimous favor. Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Mike and Melinda and Patrick, for joining us this evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That brings us down to Home to Hotel. Let me just scroll down there. Pat and Chris, thanks for your hard work on that. It's a great system. Next we have Home to Hotel tax increment financing TIF application. We're going to get a request for this TIF from Home to Hotel for 100 Station Drive. Attending, we have Nora Locknane, Paul Oliveria, and JJ Singh. Nora, would you like to take it?
Sure. So thank you very much for hearing from us tonight. On December 27th, you received a letter from Paul Oliveira on behalf of Station Drive Hotel Group, LLC. That letter requests a tax increment financing agreement for the 100 Station Drive property. So as you may recall, back in April of 2022, the planning board granted project development review approval for a 131-room hotel at 100 Station Drive. That hotel, almost 3 years later, has not been constructed. And I believe the reason for that has a lot to do with changes in construction materials and construction cost over that time period. So Mr. Oliveira, Mr. Singh have requested that the board consider a tax increment financing agreement that would help get this project to the point of fiscal viability that would allow it to go forward. The proposed construction would be at a cost of about $38 million to the developer and would eventually provide approximately $350,000 a year in hotel and meals taxes over and above the standard property taxes that are received. So for comparison purposes, right now, 100 Station Drive, it's I believe 2.74 acres, and it has a current evaluation of just over 3.8 million. That results in an annual tax payment for this year, for fiscal year 25, of just over $94,000. For comparison's sake, the Courtyard Marriott Hotel, just in the same area on University Avenue, that's assessed at over $10 million and brings in a property tax payment of over $250,000 a year, plus a personal property tax payment, plus at least $300,000 in additional meals and hotels tax. So just for comparison, that shows you the difference between an undeveloped hotel property and a developed hotel property from the town's perspective. We took a look at this, and I am asking the board to consider a proposed 10-year tax increment financing agreement with a diminishing exemption over time. I have a couple of options for the board to consider. The one I would recommend would be beginning at 50% and decreasing by 5% a year down to 50, 45, 40 over the 10-year period. So by the end of the 10-year TIF period, the applicant would be paying full property taxes on the parcel. And what this would do, I provided you with a spreadsheet that shows how this how the tax payments would be influenced by this proposed TIF. And essentially, if the property remains undeveloped over this same 10-year period, the tax payments to the town would just be for the land property tax, and they would amount to about $1.4 million. If this property is developed as the proponents wish to develop it in the near term with the tax increment financing agreement that I'm proposing, the town would see between $8 and $8.4 million over that same period of time. So I believe it would be significantly beneficial to the town. It would be beneficial to the developer as well. And it would see this as one of the last two parcels at University Station that remain undeveloped. It would finally bring it to development. The approval was granted in April 2022, so we're approaching the 5-year mark of the building sitting there, the land sitting there without a building on it. So I'm very hopeful that the board will favorably consider this request. And JJ and Paul are available to answer any questions specific to the project.
Thank you, Nora.
Let's start with select board members. Mary Ann?
Sure. Thank you very much, Nora, for that presentation, and good evening, Mr. Oliveira and Mr. Singh. Thank you for being here as well. And thank you for all the documentation you provided, Nora, which is very helpful. I think, in the first instance, as our economic development director in town, I think it's important to hear your opinion that this TIF is one which you believe we should pursue in terms of increasing commercial development in town, which we have discussed many, many times, given how critically important that is to our tax base here in town, and certainly with respect to a hotel, which is bringing in both hotel and meals tax, that is particularly attractive. I can remember when we first voted in meals and hotel tax, and now I think with the addition of, say, 300 from this facility, I think we're going to be nearing $1 million a year coming in just in hotel and meals tax, which is wonderful for Westwood. I just want to be clear with respect, if we do enter into the TIF, what protection does the town have in terms of guaranteeing that the construction will begin in a timely manner?
So I think that.
Go ahead, Nora, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
We started drawings. We started drawings, and it's certainly our intention and desire to go forward with your assistance. So we've already planned on going forward, again, with the hope that we can get a little help from the town. So we're ready to go.
And what would your expected timeline be, Mr. Oliveira, assuming the board votes in favor of the TIF?
We expect to have apply for a building permit in July and get going in the fall and into the spring of the following year.
One thing I didn't point out, just to be clear to everyone who's watching, what this would require is an article, the select board to sponsor an article for town meeting authorization to the select board to grant a TIF agreement. So the request tonight is that you consider favorably sponsoring an article. If town meeting voters support that article, then it would come back to the select board to actually negotiate and then sign a TIF agreement. And then that TIF agreement could have terms in it that dictate the start and completion dates of the project.
Thank you for adding that, Nora. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Thank you. But that's helpful to know what your timeline would be, Mr. Oliveira. Thank you. I will pass the baton to my colleagues for their questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. So if I heard you right, Paul, you said you'd like to be able to apply for permits as of, early summer and break ground as early as the fall. And did I hear you say you're expecting occupancy by, just in terms of timing, was that summer of 27 or summer of
27? Yeah,
27.
This is saying 27, yeah.
Thank you, JJ. I'm really happy to see this moving along, as I've maintained, for a long time. One of the only relief valves that we have for residents is by increasing our commercial tax base, and, having commercial business as, homes too in Westwood would bring, many folks who are going to be using, whether it's the rink that they come for tournaments or a future, Dana-Farber Center, or, there's going to be certainly plenty of demand to make this viable. And so I'm encouraged to, inclined to support this because I want to see this developed and, begin to grow on the tax rolls the way it should. So, Nora, I think the proposed 50% with the declining 5% a year makes sense to me. It certainly is far better. I mean, I know obviously, Hilton as a corporation is not in the business of sitting on undeveloped property, but at the same time, I know that the construction environment has changed some of the economics around it. So if we can help you get started sooner and all start to realize the benefits that much sooner, to me, this is something that is worth doing and worth sponsoring as an article at town meeting.
May I add, Nora, a few things to this discussion?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you so much for everyone's comments. Just a few. I'm the president of Retreat Hotels and Resorts, and we think we're going to have over 200 construction jobs, $38 million investment. Nora had mentioned that. This is $6 million of direct economic activity, separate and apart from the taxes. And we think it's over 50,000 guests per year spending money at University Station and around Westwood. 35 full-time equivalent jobs. The challenge that we're facing is that our projection of internal construction costs are up 33% since we started this. Interest rates have gone up 31%. So our annual projected borrowing costs have increased by about $900,000 a year. And we faced this challenge on another development. And we were able to break ground, and we're going to open in a few months because we were able to work in partnership with the town on some concessions regarding stormwater and other. This opportunity for a TIF would really help it, help make it work. So I appreciate the consideration.
Yeah, I mean, JJ, I know you said 50,000 guests a year, and that's probably using some pretty standard occupancy rates, in terms of projections, right? So, I mean, I think that's a reasonably conservative number, and I think, Nora, based on how I think you've gone about calculating hotels and meals taxes around those same things, also, reasonably conservative. So I think your projections would stand the test of time.
I think it's a good long-term investment in the community. And I'm also in favor of recommending it to the warrant.
Thank you, Marianne. JJ, Paul, I took a ride by there and I was, I don't want to say I was shocked. I was a little bit surprised to see yards and yards of concrete doing nothing. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, and I'm 100% behind it. So thank you so much for hanging in there. We are all very grateful. Tish, do we have any questions or comments from folks?
We do. We have one question. Nancy Hyde, 15 Martingale Lane. Is it different for us to consider a TIF with a hotel? Are there other hotels in the greater Boston area financed by TIFs? And then she said, ignore this question if it has already been addressed.
So I can say I have not researched that to see if there are other local hotels that have been financed by TIF agreements. I'm not aware of any that stand out in my mind. There may or may not be. I know in Westwood, our other hotel, the Courtyard Hotel, was not financed with a TIF.
But Nora, I'm sorry.
That doesn't change 100 yards of concrete sitting there doing nothing. I'll stick to my guns.
To the point that was just made, this will be the only other hotel in Westwood. I live in Sharon, by the way, and you know what the tax base is like here. It's 96% residential. I wish we had a bigger commercial tax base. I wish we could build it in Sharon, but we're happy to build it in Westwood and help the citizens and town of Westwood. So.
All right, Tish, anything else in the queue?
We do. There's one more question from Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. She says, we are giving up property tax revenue to generate hotels and meals tax revenue, which we are not able to fund operating expenses. Can we revisit the policy of not using any hotel and meal tax for operating budget?
Mr. Chair, may I, if you like?
Rob, please do.
Respect the question, Kathy, in terms of, yes, we are giving up some property tax in those first few years. However, we are getting this developed and, far faster than it would be otherwise. And so we are realizing incremental property tax each year, which does go to the operating budget. As far as revisiting the policy of not using hotel and meal tax for operating budget, I would be opposed to that simply because when things got bad with COVID and the, hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, basically went to nothing, that meant we didn't, because we have a policy where we only use that for one-time expenses on capital. But communities that did use that for operating budget had to make really hard and deep cuts because that source of funds evaporated. So, I understand that the nature of the question, and this is why, I'm pushing so hard that we do need to continue to grow our commercial tax base, because that's, where we get significant incremental revenue to be able to fund ongoing operations and any increases in operations. So understand the question. That's my perspective. Turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Rob. JJ, Paul, we're all going to be asked in the next week or so, will there be a walk-in restaurant in this? I studied the plans. Nora did a great, Nora, kudos on those spreadsheets. I could follow them. Thank you so much. It was very clear. Well done.
Thank you.
Will there be a walk-in restaurant, guys?
No.
No.
There'll be a small bar, and we'll serve some food at the bar,
Okay.
but not a walk-in restaurant.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Last bite of the apple, Mary Ann.
I'm happy to make a motion if everyone is ready.
Please do.
I move that the select board vote to sponsor a TIF warrant article for consideration by voters at the May 19, 2025 annual town meeting, which article would ask voters to affirm the board's authority to enter into tax increment financing agreement for the 100 Station Drive property, and if so, for the select board to indicate its preference for a TIF exemption schedule.
A second that motion.
Roll call. Mary Ann.
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Unanimous vote. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate
And
it.
Nora, thank you.
Thank
No,
you.
there's one more comment from Nancy Hyde.
Oh, okay.
That if you would like me to read.
Please.
Nancy Hyde said that my question does not reflect opposition to the TIF request. I think we should know as much as possible about this request.
Good comment. Thank you, Tish. Paul, JJ, you guys are off the hook. Stephanie.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice
Good luck
meeting
with
you.
construction, guys.
Great job, Nora. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Stephanie McManus, you are going to give us a financial update FY26 budget. Would you be so kind?
Yes, thank you. And if I could, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see that okay.
Yes.
So I'm just going to walk through a presentation tonight on where we are currently with the FY26 budget. This is just sort of keeping a history here of what I've presented so far and what has been discussed with the select board to date in fiscal year 25. So just as a reminder, we reviewed year-end closeout for FY24 back in September. We had our tax classification hearing in early December. Final tax bills were mailed out at the beginning of January. The FY24 audit was complete. That has been submitted to the GFOA, which is a national organization that the town has thankfully received awards from for the past couple of years for the financial reports that are submitted. So that was submitted on time. That's good news. The FY26 capital budget was reviewed at your December 9th and January 6th meetings. The initial budget article review was walked through with the FinCom at their January 11th meeting. And then for tonight's meeting and upcoming in January, February, March, we'll do a continued overall budget update, reviewing FY26 revenues, expenditure projections, the capital budget, reviewing the municipal budget this tonight in particular, reviewing and preparing the FY26 proposed budget, and then presenting that to the FinCon on February 12th in more detail. So to date, the overview, and this is an important note to highlight. I know we talk about this a lot, but I find it very important. It's a really collaborative process for the municipal and overall budgets. We work together closely with Budget Steering Committee. That's the school committee, select board chair, FinCom chair, the superintendent of schools, the town administrator, myself, and the finance director for the schools. It's a really collaborative group that has been good to work with so far. So we've been talking about the budget for the last couple of weeks in that group, making sure that it's a well-rounded, preserves a high level of service. And then tonight, I'm going to go through the proposed municipal budget as it stands to date, review of services included in it, any changes to salaries or expenses, do a highlight on those, and then just a history of the overall increases on what's within the municipal budget. I'll then do a overview of the proposed overall budget, and sort of when I distinguish the two, the overall budget includes what we call operating, and in that is the municipal budget, the school budget, and the third piece, what we call fixed costs. And then it's also the sewer and debt. So that's sort of the overall operating budget. And then on a higher level, the overall budget also includes the revenue source side of that. So I'll go through both areas, the expenditures and the revenues. And then for next steps at your February 3rd meeting, I will be looking for the board to vote the FY26 municipal budget, the proposed budget which will need to be balanced at that point and then released and go through the FinCom process. And both the municipal budget book and overall budget book will then be distributed PDF, posted online. So what does the municipal budget currently provide for? It's high quality services to all areas and age groups throughout the town. Components of the municipal budget, it's primarily made up of public safety and public works. That's 67% of the budget. So really the frontline people are providing services throughout town. Police and fire is 46% of the budget, and then DPW services 21%. That's maintenance of roads, all the fields in town, buildings, all of that. There's also, just as important, the programs and services for all the residents in town, including the Council on Aging, the library, recreation. We then have our state required departments, zoning, health, licensing, veterans, and our administrative departments. So just sort of an overall picture of where that all falls in what is currently the FY26 budget of $26.1 million. We say this a lot, but the municipal budget is salary driven. Our primary services are delivered through our staff, right? So police officers, firefighters, DPW workers, providing those direct services to our residents. That breakdown is currently 83% of the total budget is for salaries. And just that overall number right there, again, the 26.1 million for this year's municipal budget proposed as it is right now. Just a further breakdown, just to show the different areas that make up this budget: general government, public safety, community economic development, public works, human services, all sort of roll up into what we call this municipal budget. And as you can see, it's just a breakdown of the increases over here for a total current increase of 4.9% over the FY25 budget. On the salary side of things, this is just highlighting the major changes. It really is mostly salary changes for FY26. So approximately 1.4 million of the total increase is for salaries. 998,000, we were able to break that down a little bit further, is due to salary contractual obligations, cost of living adjustments, and step increases for staff. There's also new requests that had come in from departments to be included in the FY26 budget. Due to budgetary limit and capacity limits, we're not able, unfortunately, to fit all of these in. I would love to have all of these as part of their budgets. They're all great requests, all definitely needed. So I just wanted to highlight that for the board, that this is a list. It's approximately a little over $1 million would have been needed to add these items, which would have been an additional 4.3% increase over the current increase to the FY26 budget. That includes, sorry?
Sorry, just a quick clarification. This one
Yes.
says not all new requests were included in 20, so of this 1,067,000, is any of it included?
No, thank you, Rob, for pointing that out. It is not. So that's a request from the fire department, from library, police, youth and family services, building inspection division, some administrative programs that were requested, the Conservation Commission, and then just overall overtime increases to our fire and police departments. This is just a history to put things in perspective of the last couple of years of increases to the municipal budget and how that's been growing. So like I said already, this year's number is a 4.9% increase, just comparing it to last year, which was a 5.1. Moving on, so that's sort of the municipal, which is one piece of the operating budget. I'm going to back up a little bit further and just sort of try to paint a picture of what we're calling the overall budget, right? So that's both the expenditure side, and then I'll get into the revenue side. So the operating budget is really the heavy piece. When we talk at town meeting about Appendix D and the main article for the operating budget, this is what is included in that. It's the school budget, municipal, fixed costs. Those are the three major pieces of it. So these are the current percentage increases. I know the school committee saw a preliminary presentation from the superintendent, I believe it was last week. They are currently at a 3.5% increase for the school budget. Like I said, we're at a 4.9 on the municipal side, and then the fixed cost budget is currently at a 9% increase. And I know we've gone through the capital budget a few times, so I won't go into too much detail, but just a reminder that we have those two base capital articles that are funded with free cash. We also have a couple of supplemental capital budgets articles that are funded with either free cash, meals and hotel tax, or other funding sources such as sewer retained earnings, ambulance receipts, and our cemetery trust receipts. We then will have two articles for our liabilities reserves, one of which is the $125,000 transfer from free cash to the stabilization fund. And then the other is the 1.59 million contribution to our OPEB trust fund that is funded with taxation. So those will be two separate articles. We then will have one borrowing, I guess you'd call it article. It is technically a borrowing article. It's for our sewer MWRA program. It is a no interest loan, however, so $125,000 of that would be a no interest loan and the rest would be a grant. It's a great program that we do every other year through them. And then, which we've highlighted at your last meeting, but we do also have an article for the senior tax relief allocation of $300,000 to the aid to the elderly fund, which would be funded with free cash. So right now, that overall proposed budget as it stands with everything included is currently not balanced. We are working towards closing that gap between the projected revenue, which is a total revenue projection of 128.5 million, and our total projected expenditures right now at 130 million. So by your February 3rd meeting, it would need to, that I'm working towards that right now, closing that budget gap, coming back on the 3rd with a balanced budget for you to approve, vote on, and post and get ready to go through the FinCom process. And that is typical. Last year at this time, it was about the same. We were working towards getting to a balanced budget with a budget gap at this time as well. So on the expenditure side, on the operating budget, so the total operating budget this year is 121 million. It's a 4.6% increase over FY25 total. There are 5 main categories in this. The ones we talk about the most are the school, municipal, and what we call fixed costs, benefits, reserves, and insurance. There is also the sewer operating budget that is funded with sewer retained earnings as well as debt service. And that includes both exempt and non-exempt debt. We then have the base capital budget articles, the sewer capital, additional capital, the allocation of the stabilization fund, OPEB, all of that. So that all rolls up to that $130 million expenditure proposed budget that we have right now. Sorry. On the revenue side, so sort of what funds that, right? What funds all of these expenses that we're proposing? So there are 8 main categories. Taxes, of course, we talk about all the time. It's our main revenue source for our operating budget. State aid, which I had level funded up until this point. I did just update the board today. I think it came out at about 4 o'clock today. So this is brand new information, but the governor has released a preliminary state aid budget. And what has been posted so far is a very preliminary number for Chapter 70 and UGA. And I'll maybe get into that in the next slide as to where we are right now. But just showing on this chart, I just wanted to highlight that it is level funded year over year. However, I do have some updated information on that. Sewer enterprise, that has its own revenue source. This is sewer enterprise funds. Local receipts, what we call, just for example, motor vehicle excise tax, investment income, building permits, all that revenue is what comes in through local receipts. That is currently level funded as well. Available funds, that's ambulance receipts, conservation receipts, recreation revolving fund, smaller pieces that fund some of our operating budget. And then prior year articles and other available funds. So right now, that's just including the meals and hotel tax that we have as one of our capital budgets. That's free cash portion for our capital budget, other additional capital articles. And then we have our meals and hotel tax, which is funding one of the additional capital articles as well. And the remaining, the free cash for, which includes base capitals, the allocation of the stabilization fund, our FinCom reserve, which is funded with free cash, a portion of the select board reserve. So that's all rolled up in that amount. That comes to a total of $128.5 million. And I'll get into as much detail as you want me to on this. However, I feel like we've gone over this a few times this year and then a number of times in the past, but this is how we calculate that amount that I just highlighted on sort of what funds through taxation. So the important piece to take away tonight from this, we've already gone through sort of how we've built the number, what new growth came in at for FY25. We went over that at a previous meeting, what we're estimating for new growth. That all comes down to that $103.45 million. The important piece to take away tonight is that we are currently proposing to tax to the full levy. There are some years where we are able to, as we go through the budget process and have any kind of savings, we're able to free some of that levy capacity up. But at this point in the budget, it is being utilized to the full levy limit. Just a little deeper dive into preliminary projections on available revenue. So like I just said, the tax levy for FY26 includes that Proposition 2.5 increase that we are allowed to build into the calculation over FY25, and a conservative estimate for new growth, and then any capacity, excess levy capacity that we captured from the previous year for the full levy, which is being utilized for the FY26 budget. State aid. So the current funding from FY25 is just about $8.35 million. The governor's budget, like I said, was released today. It was a little earlier than I was even expecting. On the state, on the Chapter 70 end, it looks like we will be receiving about a 2.9% increase. And then on what we call the UGA side, so it's the unrestricted general government aid side, we're about a 2.2% increase. So pretty on point with what we were expecting. It is an increase over FY25 dollars wise. That looks like it's about 235,000 or so over the current projection for that. So some good news. I mean, I'd love to tell you it was $1 million, but at least it's something. So local receipts still projecting level funding at about 4.6 million. Just a reminder that estimate was increased in the FY25 budget by 400,000. And just a reminder of examples of what makes up those categories. Free cash certification we've gone through a few times. That's 14.3 million. That was as of July 1st, 2024. And we're continuing with the current allocations per our financial policies. So that includes the base capitals for the base capital articles for school and municipal, stabilization fund allocation, FinCom reserve, and part of the select board reserve. And then we're also utilizing $920,000 for an additional above the base capital article. Meals and hotel tax, which was discussed a little bit tonight. We're utilizing, utilizing meals and hotel tax for additional capital beyond the base. And then other funding sources such as the ambulance receipts and cemetery perpetual care. I'll just really quickly highlight, just go through the different funding sources and the balances in those accounts, just to give you perspective on what kind of, amount of those funding sources we're using to fund the budget. So right now, free cash certified of 14.3 million. We're using, like I said, a little over 4 million of that, well within our range of keeping with the 4% of our general fund operating budget as our baseline to not go below. Meals and hotel tax, the current balance is 2.4 million, enough to fund that additional capital article we're requesting of about $1 million. And then ambulance receipts, 1.66 million, again, enough to fund what we're asking for in the capital, both the capital budget and then the operating offset that included in that. The sewer retained earnings, they have a final unreserved fund balance, sort of their version of retained earnings on their end for FY24 of 2.9 million, again, enough to cover their budgets. And then the cemetery perpetual care receipts, the current balance of that portion, the expendable portion of that is 60K. Piece of that, we're using $50,000 in the capital budget. The stabilization fund, just a brief history here of this. This is what we call the town's main reserve account. It protects us against any emergencies that might come up. It's also a very important piece of the of our current credit rating of AAA bond rating. It can help mitigate budget disruptions if any issues come up, economic decline, anything like that. Just as an example, as it happened during COVID. So the target per our financial policies for the current year would be 4.3 million. And with this proposed allocation of 125,000 FY26, we're almost on target there. So we're getting very close to being on target with our financial policies as where we should be with this account. The OPEB liability trust fund, the FY26 appropriation would be 1.59 million into that. Just a reminder, that is taxation. It is its own article at town meeting. We are on target with the funding plan. We're doing the additional $25,000 increase as is done in past years. And just, it's pretty evident here. You can see how it goes up year over year. And each year we make that allocation into that other post-employment benefit unfunded liability account.
Hey, Steph.
Yes.
I don't know if I've just noticed this for the first time on that slide.
Did I do something wrong?
No. It's just intriguing to me is there are two places where there was a change in healthcare plan that seemed to significantly improve the ability of our ability to make contributions to funding this. Is that
Yes.
coincidence? Explain that a little bit.
It's not coincidence. That's sort of actually where they started funding. And I don't have it in front of me. I will go, maybe at a future meeting, I can go into the whole history of it, but that's sort of what the town used to jumpstart, I'll say, this fund. When they switched over to the GIC and there was they had a cost savings because of the health insurance, healthcare plan change, they were able to take that savings and start this fund, which was, very, very smart at the time to do.
I was just looking to see, hey, is there any other change that could be on the horizon that could help us make that next jump? So
yep, I know where you're going. Yep, that is something that, towns look at, and it's a great thing to capture when you're able to do that. So yes, yep. All right, so on the operating budget side, just a reminder, this provides for the core services that go right out to the community, right? So we strive for operating budgets that are sustainable. Each 1% increase for the school municipal budget is approximately 819,000. It's sort of just putting into perspective when we talk about these percentage increases, what that really means dollar-wise, overall cost-wise, fitting with our capacity-wise. So just a reminder on that. So these are the percentages for the school and municipal side, and then also just a history on both of those. And then sort of just a chart reminding you of the overall operating budget of 121 million, how that's broken down, right? So school, municipal, our fixed cost piece, and then debt service. Right now, like I said, the municipal is a 4.9 for FY26, and the school is a 3.5. Breaking that down a little bit further, on the school side, I do want to point out, just in case this comes up sometimes, the school number might look a tad bit different. See this 59 million. When we talk about on our side, the school budget, we include the school operating proposed budget as well as traffic supervisors and the Blue Hills Regional School. So any students that go to the Blue Hills, we have an assessment from that, and we pay for that. So just wanted to highlight that quickly. And then on the municipal side,
Just
the 26.
I'm
Sorry?
sorry, could you just jump back one slide as an
Yeah, of
observation
course.
back to me? So as you look at these bar charts and how the operating budget is allocated, you see that fixed cost is rapidly approaching the equivalent of what the municipal budget is. And, you know, it's going up by, what you have, almost 9% this year. And, you know, on the municipal side, what are we going up? 4, 9, or 5?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's going up almost twice as fast. It will surpass if those trends were to hold the operating budget. We would be putting more money into fixed costs potentially.
It's a good note. Yeah. Yes, you are correct. And so just as Rob highlighted, it's the 26 million for municipal, 24 million for fixed costs. We then have our debt service and sewer, which all rolls up into that $121 million number for the operating budget. Oh, and sorry, just one more note to add on that end. So health insurance, these are things that are still outstanding that I will hope to have more information for you late February, at the latest early March for health insurance, the Blue Hills assessment, and the MWRA assessment. On the fixed cost side, like Rob was just saying, it's a 9% increase currently right now. Our pension assessment is an increase of about 9% over the current year. Still waiting for the final estimate, the final assessment letter from Norfolk County Retirement System. Still needs to be finalized. I'm very much hoping that you'll either get an email from me in the next week or two, or definitely an update at your February 3rd number on that. But that is a pretty good estimate at this point in time, the 6.7 million. Health insurance, we have received preliminary information about from the GIC on sort of what they're projecting out for their plans. They are, middle of the road, suggesting about a 10% increase over the current year. There was a note that their February 27th meeting will be where they vote their final rates. So if that's true, it's a little bit, maybe a week or so earlier than usual, which is a good thing. So I'll be coming to you late February with an update on what the actual cost for the increase for health insurance will be. Waste collection and disposal, that's always another big chunk of the fixed cost budget. It's an estimated increase of 9% right now. And then just the other smaller pieces such as comprehensive insurance, payroll tax, other things is about a 5% increase or so at this time, a total of $190,000. And then just a reminder, because I do throw it in because it is taxation, but it's not really part of the operating budget. The OPEB appropriation has an increase of $25,000 for that 1.59 allocation into that account. Is just next steps in the budget. So continuing obviously to update about the FY26 revenue projections, any new information that comes in from state aid, any local revenue sources updates on any information that comes in, continue to review the capital budget articles with you as we go along, any ongoing capital articles. Pretty much everything that has been presented will be what moves forward to FinCom. Updating on any FY26 assessments that come in, Blue Hills, MWRA, health insurance, and then that big proposed budget document, sort of what we're working towards, or it will be released early February, which will include the municipal budget book and then the overall budget book and then the capital articles. So at your February 3rd meeting, I would be looking to provide any updates or changes that come in between now and February 3rd and present a balanced budget at that point. So right now, what I'm working towards is closing that gap that I highlighted tonight, going through, communicating with you on where we are on that, coming back at your February 3rd meeting with a balanced budget to be approved and released. And then that will be presented in detail at the FinCom meeting on February 12th, and then obviously at their March public hearing. That's what I have for sort of the presentation piece of that. And so tonight I'm just looking for any questions, any guidance moving forward on changes that need to be made, or just feedback from the board on that to sort of so that I can do my work closing that gap and coming to you with a balanced budget to be released by your February 3rd meeting.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was a great presentation. Marianne, any questions or comments?
Well, first of all, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for all of your work in putting that together. And I think it bears mentioning again that the fixed cost increase is really what is currently driving the budget gap that we're working on. Unfortunately, it is not something that was expected or that we could reasonably even suspect, particularly with respect to the pension assessment having gone up by so much this year, $600,000 in 1 year. So that's a challenge. We'll work through this to get to the balanced budget that we need to present, but it really is a very significant challenge. I know that one of the issues we need to talk about tonight, it was raised at our last meeting, was or is the potential of adding new staff. Particularly, we discussed potentially adding to the fire department staffing. And so I'd like to just address that because I know that you and Chris are looking for direction with respect to how to close the gap and present a balanced budget. So a couple of words on that from me. I very much support the progress that we have made with the fire department in light of the operational study that we had conducted with the stated goal of this board to fully staff the fire department to 11 members on all 4 teams. And what we have done over the last couple of years on this board is to spend a great deal of time allocating resources to our fire department, which does such an amazing job of protecting all of us. Those resources have included the operational study and feasibility study that we did. It includes all of the work that's been done with respect to FS1. And in particular, what we did last year, just to remind folks, is that we did add 2 new firefighters to our roster at the fire department. And we did that without a new revenue source. We did that by making sacrifices because we felt that was important to do. And we were able to make that happen, but we weren't able to make any other new hires that had been requested in the other departments. This year, we are looking at a very significant budget gap, again, due in large part to the unexpected increase in the fixed costs. With respect to the fire department, we do still have hope that we may be successful this year with the SAFER grant, which the chief, I recently spoke to him. I know he is planning to reapply for that after in the next few months. And given all of the work that has gone in the past couple applications, I'm very hopeful that we may be successful in getting that grant, which would tremendously benefit what we can do within the department in a very significant way, and frankly, in a way that doesn't exist, as far as I know, with respect to any other department that we have in terms of that kind of grant opportunity. I guess what I'm very long-windedly saying is that I very much stand by the commitment that we made as a board to get to 11 within the department. However, given our current financial situation and the need for us to be fiscally responsible, I do not see a way that we will be able to do that this year while we are focused on closing this budget gap. And I just also want to say one further thing, if I may, which is, we do receive and have received, as Stephanie alluded to, requests for increases from other departments. And clearly, our fire department, our police department are so critically important to our public safety. But I do also want to mention that there are so many other aspects of the services the town provides that are important to our residents. We think about this week with DPW, with the snow, just allowing people to move and get to work and get to school and get to where they need to go. The services that are provided to our seniors at our senior center that they absolutely rely on. The services that Youth and Family Services provide to our family, sometimes families in crisis. All of these services are important. And we are in a year where we're trying to close this budget gap so that we do not have to make any cuts in any other areas so that we can continue to deliver those services to residents. So thank you for your patience as I outlined my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm going to dovetail onto what you said because I am as well concerned about the staffing at the fire department. I'm taking a look at the 2013 study by Emergency Services Consulting that said assuming full staffing of 11 personnel per shift. And then the Criterion study in 2023 that we recommend that each station have a staffed engine / squint and each station have a staffed ALS ambulance. I'm still going to push for that and heeding my colleagues Rob's suggestion about putting up a shut up. I'd like to share my screen in 2 slides. Can I do that, Tish?
Yeah, she should be able to.
Can folks see that?
No.
Whoop, wait a minute. How's that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is the latest data I could come up with, but just so that folks understand why I'm so concerned. This is from January 2022. It's about 243 days. And during those 243 days, they had simultaneous ambulance calls 232 times. So they are doing quite a bit of much more running, and I'm concerned about the simultaneous runs and not being able to field 2 ambulances. And the other thing I want to show, and Rob, this is per your suggestion. What I did, first of all, I tortured Stephanie one morning, asked her 100 million questions, and she was absolutely a saint helping guide me through some of the pitfalls of my thinking. But as I said to Stephanie, and Rob, you probably have too, but in my workplace, I've had to go through cost reductions. And generally they come at 5%. I don't get to debate or ask. I'm just told, slash everything 5%. First things that go with cell phones. Next thing is out-of-state travel. The next thing is conferences. And then open positions get frozen. I don't want to go down that road. But I'm not hesitant. I know I'm not going to make people happy. But I took a look at the expenses. Just the expenses, not the whole budget, and I put them in this column C. And the expenses out of each, not every department, I didn't touch Memorial Day and some of the other things, came out to about 2.5 million. if I do a 2% reduction, which is pretty light, I capture about $50,000. Let me make sure I'm clear. So I'm going to reduce the rec department 2%, $300, and add it to this column, or 2.5%. On the 2% model, I'm going to respectfully suggest that we might not need this Westwood word that comes out 3 times a year for $55,000. I'm not sure we're getting our money's worth out of that. Second thing was I looked at cell phone reduction, 50% or 25%. And then I looked at the select board reserve account, 200,000 of that is via taxation. I think, Stephanie, you said taxation is what I had to look for. Is that correct? Okay. So what I came up with these two models, and this is just something for us to think about, is with just a simple 2% or 2.5% expense reduction in these accounts, eliminating the glossy newsletter, which I prefer to have a paramedic with the AED in his hand than the glossy newsletter in my mailbox, or taking a look at the cell phone usage, we should be able to come up with $180,000 to fund 2 more. Now, Chris and Molly, I'm not suggesting that we won't be able to do this model 100% of the time. I realize that the overtime is what kills us. Fixed cost is running way ahead of the game. But if we can go from currently, we probably have using a 20% model of unearned productivity for sick time, vacation time, FMLA, those sorts of things, we can probably field 2 ambulances 40% of the time. If we add 2 more firefighter paramedics, that gives us probably 80% of the time being able to field 2 ambulances. And what I'm saying is I can't advocate for have 2 ambulances around the clock. I mean, there are stations, we all know, different parts of the Commonwealth, that sometimes the cities and towns can't fund to keep all 3 or 4 stations open. They open them as they can. So what I'm suggesting is that let's think about a different way of doing this without making the tax gap that Stephanie's trying to close worse. And I know there's some comments made about not being able to fill the positions. I took a look at that. I just want to make one observation. Needham has 2 relatively new fire stations. Norfolk has a new fire station. Rentham has a new fire station. Northborough has a new fire station. Dedham has a new fire station. They don't have paramedics. And the fire station that Westwood has, I can't think of any other way of saying it, it's a stink hole. If we're going to recruit people, we have to have something a lot better than what we got now. And that's all I have to say on that. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen, I hope.
Mr. Chair, before I speak, I know I saw Chris had his hand up for quite a while before, so I'll defer to him before I make any comments.
Thanks, Rob. I'm just trying to get back to my notes. Chris, why don't you go ahead while I try to get off screen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment is a little, excuse me, my comment's a little out of order. I wanted to thank Stephanie for the presentation she made, and also for the budget steering working group for their contribution, ongoing contribution, and having those difficult discussions, and for everyone volunteering their time for that.
Thanks, Chris. Rob, I'm sure you've got something to say.
I do.
I did listen to you, Rob. Rob, I did listen to you.
I understand that. I can't say that I could digest all of what you had on screen for the brief period of time that it was on screen. So I, appreciate that the opportunity to review that more thoroughly.
Sure.
I will echo a little bit of what Mary Ann said earlier about, the services that we provide to the community, and that, we need to be able to provide Chris and Stephanie some very clear direction. Because honestly, the town budget is our most specific demonstration of the commitment to the community. And so what we prioritize from that investment standpoint is what allows us to maintain that health and well-being of our community. And I know that's exactly why, Joe, you're trying to prioritize the addition of these 2 firefighters. But you also, you did highlight that you initiated the town departments coming to us and presenting. And at our last meeting, we heard from Danielle and all of those departments within Human Services and the tremendous impact that those folks have had and how residents benefit and appreciate the services that are provided. And, as I said then, and it's part of what makes Westwood a great community. So, the numbers, and again, I have to sort of process that a little more closely by diving into it. But my recollection is that probably only gets us halfway to those 2 firefighters, which means we would have more difficult decisions to make in terms of things that would have to be cut in order to realize the full funding for those 2 additional firefighters. Now, look, we're not alone either in having to make those difficult choices. I don't know. I watched the school committee meeting the other night, and they had to talk about necessary changes to services that are under their purview. And at their meeting, you saw residents who were advocating for things that were directly impacting their kids. And their concerns were real because the consequences of the decisions that the school committee was trying to make are also real. So this is the hardest part of the job. So, here we are sitting here trying to close, Steph, if I got your numbers right, we're about $1.5 million short. And, I believe that there's going to be ways that we can help narrow that gap. Adding these 2 firefighters while trying to provide continued level services in the other areas is only driving that gap wider. I haven't even had time to sort of process what the implications of those specific expense line cuts. I appreciate you focusing only in the expense line area, Joe, because quite frankly, that at least is not people that we're talking about. I do have one, thought that might help us close that gap a little bit. I know, previously we also talked about the yard waste pickup. And Chris, I want to thank you for answering the question that was posed by FinCom by highlighting the fact that there were, always 10 pickups, and that at some point we moved a pickup from July to another time of year where the tonnage was greater. And while I appreciate the idea of, negotiating a more favorable contract that would allow us to fit that 11th pickup that we've asked for, quite frankly, when we got a budget gap the size that we do, I'd much rather use those negotiated savings to close the gap, and let's just move one back to July. Then we get what you're looking for, Joe, in terms of some of that summer pickup. It addresses the concerns, handled by the residents, expressed by the residents, but at the same time, we're taking the cost savings that, good negotiating has been able to yield and putting that towards closing the gap. That sounds like a win to me. So, I can't see a way to fund these 2 firefighters without making other significant and meaningful cuts that we haven't, we will have to talk about at some point before moving forward with those 2 firefighters. I stand as Marianne said earlier, I stand by the idea of working towards funding those things. And I think the SAFER grant is the right way to go because that allows us to sort of ramp the payment, the sort of pain of adding them over several years with grant money. So that's, unless we have, new growth that can help sustain and support those additional positions, I would be, trying to guide Stephanie and Chris towards closing that gap. But I would like to take a look more at what you put forward and try to understand from Chris and Stephanie's perspective what the implications of those, I know you were sort of just using round numbers. So I don't know what those round numbers and sort of they're even, but they're a little bit arbitrary in their choice, you know, so I just want to understand what those things would actually mean to those departments and what potential services that would eliminate.
Rob, all I really try to do, and I don't like mixing different things up, yard waste and this and that and everything. I just try to draw upon my own personal experience when having been given the orders to reduce the budget in the areas that I targeted and how I did it. I tried to make it cost neutral, period. That was it. And I just wanted this as a tool for the three of us to kind of take a look at it. I'll send it to Tish tonight and she can send it along to you. And it ain't perfect. You know, I didn't have a spreadsheet to work off of, Rob. I'm pulling off a PDF, plugging them into an Excel sheet all last weekend. I just tried to do something cost neutral to get, gosh darn it, I want to see an ambulance down in Islington and 2 more firefighters. That's it. They save lives.
And you're not alone. And I respect the effort and what you did, right? So I like I said, want to, you know, ingest that and take a good hard look at it and understand what the real world implications of those things are, because you're taking sort of private sector experience and trying to apply that into a public service model. And, you know, again, it makes sense that that is the approach that you want to take in terms of what your lived experience is, but we also need to understand what that implication is for the town staff. Like, you know, the 50% reduction in cell phones, is that we're choosing and picking and choosing who's getting their cell phone paid for or not? Like, I don't know what that means in terms of how that changes our ability to operate. As that's just an example.
I just drew upon, we should, well, you and I can, you know, we can discuss this later, but I just drew upon my own professional experiences and how we went down this road. And I had to do 5% cuts. These 2 or 3% isn't, I could handle a 5% cut on my expenses. And if you really take a close, long look at it, these have been level funded for years. So I don't think if someone wants to come to me and say, Joe, the 2.5% is going to kill me, then the three of us can discuss that and work that thing out. But in any case, I just want to put that model out there. I'll send the spreadsheet along. I try to make it cost neutral, and that's the end of that. For me, anyways. Marianne, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
You know, I have some questions about it, Joe, in terms of what the impact would be. I understand the spirit in which you are proposing it. Frankly, I have some concerns, you know, even if we were able to fund the positions, I have concerns about overtime, and I'd like to see us work on that for the fire department. But to your point, I'd like to know more about what the impact of those cuts would be.
Sure. And just maybe I wasn't clear. I'm not saying that we have to fund this to the $1 million plus that we're doing. I'm just saying, let's see if we get a second ambulance into Islington 75 to 80% of the time and not break the bank on overtime. That's all I'm saying. Just increase the odds for the people who are having those heart attacks, who are having those strokes. Get the services there quickly. That's all I'm saying. And I'll send it along. You guys will find all kinds of holes in it. But in any case, that's what I wanted to do. Any questions? Oh, go ahead, Rob.
I guess I do have a question.
Sure.
So Stephanie and Chris need to be able to, for our next meeting, deliver a balanced budget. Now, they need from us tonight direction. So if there is direction being given, are we instructing them to find a way to fund those 2 firefighters? Because they're going to have to then present much more substantive service reductions in other areas in order to close the gap. Because even the stuff that you just put forward only gets us halfway to the incremental cost of those 2 firefighters. So I get what it is you're trying to do, and I respect the desire to get to where those staffing, you know, studies have said. These guys need specific and clear direction from the three of us.
Absolutely, Rob. I agree with you 100%. I know they're working like gangbusters, but we can't cut the cake tonight. I'm happy to send it along to you. If you and Mary Ann can look at it within a few days and if you pick up the phone and say, Chris, I think Joe's full of malarkey. There's no way I'm going to support this. Or Mary Ann, if you say, yeah, I like the idea, let's take another close look at it. Then from that, but I don't think we ought to try to cut the cake tonight, Rob. I understand.
I'm not saying that we should try to cut the cake. I'm saying whether we're even trying to ice the cake with these 2 additional firefighters. In my mind, we've got $1.5 million budget gap to close just to be able to get to balanced.
Yeah.
So
you're not willing to entertain anything?
I don't see any way other than getting a list of potential cuts that get made in order to get that done this year. So I think we need to give them that instruction tonight as to whether or not they're going to endeavor to find things to cut, because I believe there's and Chris or Stephanie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's challenges with potentially cutting positions in order to, because 85 or whatever your chart said before, 83% of the services we deliver are in the form of people, because it's people that deliver the service. So I don't know how we talk about service cuts without talking about potentially people cuts. And I think there's some hoops to go through to get that done. And we're challenged for both time and money. So
just for the record, I wasn't entertaining on slashing any positions, Rob. I was just wanted to suggest a different format of going forward. I didn't know tonight was a drop dead date and time.
No. I'm not saying it's a drop dead date, Joe. I'm saying that these guys need direction. And if your suggestions, as you put them forward, get us halfway to the 2 additional firefighters, it means we still have almost $200,000 of additional cuts that need to be made in order to be able to fund those. That's just a math fact. So I'm just trying to say to Chris and Stephanie, what do you need in the way of direction in order to be able for us to vote a budget come our next meeting on February 3rd?
So from
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, go right ahead, Stephanie. From my perspective, we are looking to close the budget gap based on the existing services. So, and again, just as a reminder, this is a select board article, select board budget. If the select board would like us to increase services, we just need a direction from the board where you want us to increase those services so we can make that adjustment. So if it's the firefighters, if it's yard waste, if it's anything else, if it's cutting certain things, if that's a suggestion that you would like us to look at, we can certainly look at that and share with the board what the impact of that would be. But we just need, so right now we're trying to close from existing services, as Stephanie indicated, there's no additional positions. We're trying to close that gap and to present something to the board so the board can have your consideration, your vote on your budget at your next meeting on February 3rd. If there are additional services that you would like us to add into it, we just would like that direction from the board. Stephanie, is there anything that you would like to add?
All right, so there's no possibility then, just so I want to make sure I understand this. So we cut the cake tonight, and you are not capable of coming to us at our next meeting with here's option A, here's option B, and here's option C. That's not possible. Is that what you're telling me, Chris?
I never said that, Joe. What I said was we're trying to close the existing budget gap.
Yeah. Is that possible to come to us at the next meeting with?
As long as the board tells us what they would like us to add, yes.
Okay. So what do you guys want to do?
I'm gonna stand by what I said before, Joe.
Okay.
And to everyone's relief, I won't take as much time to say that this time. Not to make light of the situation, because this is serious. This is serious business. This is the hardest work that we do on the select board, is putting together this budget, which is so important to our town, which is taxpayer money. And I'm very cognizant of that and the burden of that, and of the competing priorities and the identified priority that we have, this board, in terms of our fire department, that which we have spent so much time and effort and energy on. But given what is on our plate at this point with respect to the budget, I just don't see a path that is fiscally responsible for making those additions that we would all like to make at this time. I am very committed, and I hope this board in the future will continue on the path to try to do that, and hopefully the SAFER grant will come through this year, which would be amazing. But I just don't see a path, Joe, toward doing that.
No. Yeah, I just try to bring my professional experience to the table, and
Of course.
I'm not taking offense to it, and I would never you're always very eloquent, Mary Ann, so don't worry. I follow you perfectly all the time. You do a great
Far
job.
more than both of us, Joe, right? And so, yeah, and look, I look forward to being able to support adding these 2 firefighters when we've got the available recurring revenue to do so. I'm in agreement with Mary Ann that I don't see a path to getting there this year.
Okay.
I want to see us get to a balanced budget. And I know it's a drop in the bucket, but any thought on that? Like, let's just take the savings from, whatever Todd's able to negotiate, help close that budget, and let's just move on back to July.
I can't say anything else.
No, I mean, I'm serious. I'm just trying to find a way to help you get what you want to do and help those residents, but at the same time, do it in a fiscally responsible way. If we moved one once, and I know there would have been data supporting why to move it or whatever, but if we want to have a summer pickup, let's just take one of the 10 and move back to July.
We have flogged this horse to death. Stephanie, Chris, do you need any additional guidance from the select board on what to do next?
I think, I'm sorry, Stephanie, your turn.
Nope, I was just gonna say, so I'm hearing that I'm sort of continuing along with the budget as it was presented tonight and just focusing on closing that budget gap without adding additional bodies. Is that sort of what I'm hearing?
That is correct.
Okay.
Although, I guess I should, do we have any discussion, questions or anything from the audience?
I don't see anything in Q&A.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
So,
please do.
So first and foremost, I want to thank the 3 of you for understand this is your volunteer time and your volunteer work and the commitment that you give to the town. And Joe, I certainly want to thank you for what you presented. You threw out something that I'd like to just ask the board if you'd like us to consider. Would you like us to consider reallocating, taking the Westwood Word money, either being able to reallocate that to close the gap, and if we are sufficient enough, if we're able to close a gap, reallocating that to possibly fire overtime?
I'm not advocating for overtime.
No, no, to increase the overtime budget.
I've been in management too long, Chris. I'm not advocating for that.
To increase the fire overtime budget, and the reason why I say that,
I need a paramedic.
The reason why I say that is because of what transpired last year, and understanding that it was not it wasn't the amount that we would have liked to have added to overtime, but within the sustainable budget process, the amount that we did, that 100,000 is what we added. So it's a question for the board if you'd like us to consider that. So we would no longer have the word going in July, and we would either use that funding to help close the budget gap. If the budget gap can be closed without that, would the board like us to reallocate that to fire overtime? I know the board's not advocating for overtime, but just to help fund that account, further fund that account, excuse me.
I think that's a reasonable and actually responsible trade-off, right? Because, we know there is overtime in part to try and, staff, right? And so we know that there's going to be a need for those overtime dollars. And if as much as I want to engage the community as much as possible with all that's going on, I could see that being a reasonable step towards helping close some of what Marianne had identified earlier as a need in that overtime area. So I would be supportive of that idea.
Wait a minute, Marianne. Before we go any further, I'm deeply troubled that there's no questions, answers, or comments coming in, Tish?
There's actually an individual on the chat or on the call who has her hand raised, and I believe it's Kathy Wallace.
Oh, now I see it. Okay. Go ahead, Marianne, then we'll get to Kathy.
And also, Joe, we do have one question in the queue right now.
That's the only one I see. Okay. Go ahead, Marianne, you've got the floor.
Okay. I agree that I think given where we find ourselves, as we have discussed at length, that putting that to overtime under the circumstances we find ourselves in is a good idea. That said, I would like to hear from residents in terms of the benefit of the publication, to try to gauge interest. I haven't heard, I don't know that we've ever surveyed folks in terms of what value that has for them. So if there are folks who feel strongly about it, I'd like to hear about it. Please let us know what value that has. That said, I am in favor of, for the 26 budget, removing that item and putting that money to fire overtime.
Just as a point of clarification, I just want to make sure that the idea would be to use it for the budget gap. If it's not needed for the budget gap, then to reallocate it to fire overtime. Is that something? I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I'm being a little overly optimistic, I suppose. Yes, that's exactly what I meant.
And just as a point of just for a reminder for everyone, we also have an electronic communication that goes out called the Wire. So residents can sign up for that, and we can have information in the Wire. I'm not saying it's going to be exactly the same information that's currently in the Word, but that's something that's electronic that we continue to put out.
And Chris, just along those lines, while it may not be as much information that's in the Wire currently, isn't remind me as to the frequency of the electronic version, because, to me, a big part of that money that goes to the Wire currently is postage, right?
Postage and printing.
And printing, yeah.
Yes.
So I mean,
so this is a hard copy that's mailed to each household.
If we have essentially, a very cost-efficient way of distributing, the goings-on of the town, I think we would highly encourage as many residents as possible to subscribe to the digital version of that, to minimize the impact of the removal of the hard copy posted version.
And since you just gave me a segue, I'm going to make a plug for that. Residents can go to the town's website under Notify Me, and they can sign up for the Alert Westwood, which is our reverse 911, as well as the Wire and other things as well. And you can find that right on the homepage. So I'm sorry, do we want to address one of the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had a little emergency to take care of here. Where are we? Questions? Was there a question, Tish? Something.
There's a resident has her hand raised, her arm raised, hand raised, and we also have a question in the queue. Which one would you like to take first?
Your choice.
I'm sorry.
I think the
You
person
get
who
to
had her
pick.
hand raised had it raised first.
Yes, so we can, would you like to allow Kathy Wallace to talk?
As long as I get my timer. I'm ready. Please. Kathy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening, everybody. 283 Farm Lane is my address. And as you all know, I am a passionate advocate for the fire department, but I'm also a passionate advocate for the safety of residents. And in order for our department to be mission ready, which is what we want them to be, they need this staff. Last year for the FY25 budget, we requested, not we, but I mean we as a town, requested 4 firefighters and only 2 were able to be funded. So at that point, in my mind, the planning should have started for FY26 to find money or space for the other 2. This is an accident waiting to happen, literally. I think it creates a liability for the town, and I think it's morally wrong. They save lives pretty much every time they go out the door of the station. Marianne, you referenced the 2 studies as progress. I don't consider it progress to do a study 12 years ago and not act on the results. We're fine. Those are excuses. Those are not action. I hope and pray we can get the SAFER grant. We have a new administration. A lot's going to go on. There could be delays in that even being authorized to be funded. I looked online. There's nothing on ready for that yet. Last year, March was the application date with a deadline of April. And I always operate by hope is not a plan. You need a real plan. I think the board needs to find a way to fund these 2 positions. It doesn't even solve the problem. Right now, we are 10 under what was recommended in 2013 that we have for our fire department. Add in the fact that Norwood Hospital's been closed and will be for the foreseeable future. Add in, hopefully, we will be going to build a new fire station and these people will be living in temporary quarters trying to maintain the level of services. They're going to need all hands on deck and more hands on deck. I have to think if we add these 2 people that maybe overtime would go down because we would have more people in the group to show up to make sure we have the 9. Let's not forget wildfires in California. I mean, hopefully we never have anything that dramatic happen here, but we did have wildfires this fall caused by the drought. And personally, I found it to be a little bit alarming how close they were and how hard those firefighters had to work in Massachusetts. And as we've said, they need to be mission ready. Having these 2 extra bodies would increase the probability of an ambulance. And Joe showed how many times there are overlapping calls. That means somebody might have to wait for an ambulance from Walpole if they're having a heart attack. Chances are not good for that person. And I do want to look at some of the finances because I don't like to just bring problems. I like to try to bring solutions too. I think the fees need to be looked at across the board, across town. I listened to many meetings where we're not even breaking even with fees. I'm not just talking about ambulance fees. I'm talking in the school department. I'm talking about building rentals and et cetera. In listening to Stephanie's presentation, there was a line where it said $998,000, which were step increases and COLA increases. I want to know, does that include what was presented at a prior meeting of about $360,000 of just across the board step increases for every staff member? Because as a resident, I take offense to that if that's included there. I want 2 firefighters. I don't want unilateral raises being given that are not performance-based.
Kathy, I gave you 1 extra minute. Do you think you can
Okay.
put that up?
Yeah, 2 more things.
Thank you.
Just 2 more things, then I'm done. The state aid increase that's anticipated, I think I heard this right, is going to be about $235,000. Obviously, we don't know if that's coming through yet, but we should craft a budget as if it is as we move through the process. That would pay for 2 firefighters. And the last thing I'm going to say is it seems like we put a lot of money into accounts, reserve accounts, and we can't get it out. If listening to the presentation, free cash, meals tax, stabilization fund, I added up to being about $15.7 million that isn't being spent in FY26. That's all. Thank you. I implore the board, find a way to do these 2 firefighters and decrease the liability and protect our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I see 2 things under Q&A, Tish. Am I missing anything?
No, there's 2 questions. Would you like me to read them?
Please.
Okay. Francisco, 20 Pine Lane, trying to brainstorm on where we could save money. I want to hear from Stephanie, what is the budget for town personnel vehicles? How many vehicles are in that budget? In that budget, what does that include? Gas, repairs, insurance, etc. I'm not talking about fire, police chief cars. Why can't this be cut to save money? It should not be part of a personnel contract.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Tish.
And then this, do you want to read the second
Please.
question?
Yep.
Ellen Rollins, I think she made a comment, 86 Green Hill Road. Since we're discussing fiscal responsibility, I think it makes more than good sense to eliminate the printed newsletter. I appreciate the board supporting this.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Tish. Pat, am I missing any questions or anything?
Not that I can see. Let me just, so there are no hands up from the attendees?
Oh, okay. All right then. So where are we? What do you guys want to do?
I think I've given my input.
You set, Rob?
Staying with what I said before.
Okay.
You know, just I almost said this during Stephanie's presentation, for the benefit of anybody who might be tuning in for the first time. We talk about a lot of this stuff frequently, and it's one of those things that sometimes can be confusing when, you know, we talk about free cash standing at, you know, $14 million, and Ms. Wallace just, you know, referenced that, you know, being stuff that we're not accessing. Typically our free cash, and Stephanie, please keep me honest on this, tends to be somewhere in around $8 million. And our financial policies say that we need to hold sort of 4% of the general budget in reserve on free cash. So we typically spend around somewhere between 3 and 4 million on capital projects out of that free cash, leaving the appropriate reserve behind. The only reason that the free cash number is where it is because of the fact that we were building Pine Hill School and we had very large deposits earning, for the first time in a long time, high interest rates. It's the one time the interest rates work in our favor. And so I think you've heard a number of things in terms of how that money is being proposed to be spent on capital, because free cash is a one-time capital expense type of account or source of funds per our financial policies. So I respect the idea that, you know, Ms. Wallace is advocating for. I just think we need to have the appropriate recurring revenue available to fund those positions.
Stephanie, do you need any further guidance?
Nope, so my plan will just be to continue forward with the budget as I'm working on now, closing that gap as I'm hearing, not adding anything, the possibly looking into cutting the newsletter, shifting that around, and then again, just coming at your February 3rd meeting with a balanced budget.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to annual town meeting article discussion, potential vote to amend, accept, and remove articles. Chris, are you taking this? Who's handling this?
I know we have Nora here. I can certainly share this. We had a request, Nora, if you want to add anything. We had a request from the planning board to add a zoning amendment, a planning board article to the warrant, and the request would come through if the select board chose to use one of your miscellaneous articles for that spot. This is an amendment, a zoning amendment relative to major business development, MBD, and to see if the town, and the recommendation from the planning board is to see if the town would delete zoning bylaw section 7.2 major business development and amend the relative sections of the zoning bylaw that reference major business development of MBD or take any other action relative thereto. Nora, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
I just, sorry, having trouble with my camera. It's not staying on. So I would just point out that this is an article that Building Commissioner Mike Perkins and I are recommending to the planning board, and they are taking it up for their initial discussion at their meeting next week. So they have not even seen it yet. But there's an old section in the bylaw, major business development. It was adopted in 1992, I believe. And from what I can see, it has not been used. I know for a fact it has not been used in the last 10 years, probably in the last 15 years. And I don't believe it was used even before then. It seems to be a section that was originally, the idea of it seems to have been to add another layer of review for large business-related projects to go before the planning board for a special permit. Since 1992, our town has changed dramatically. Our zoning has changed dramatically. We adopted the University Avenue Overlay District that I think this was originally intended to address the University Avenue area. We also added flexible multiple use overlay districts. And between the two of them, I believe we have this covered. We were also concerned about the implications of having this section on the bylaw that's not needed and that is written in a way that could be misinterpreted. So I will be making a request to the planning board at its meeting on the 28th to sponsor an article to remove the major business development section of the bylaw and any references to that. But in order to do that, I need to ask that the select board grant us one of the reserve articles for that purpose.
Anybody, do we need to make a motion on that, Chris, or can we just tell her we'll hold one aside?
So the practice has been, Mr. Chair, that the board would vote to either accept the recommendation to use one of the miscellaneous articles or not to.
And
That's what I thought.
And earlier we said we committed to using one of them miscellaneous articles for the Homes 2 TIF, right? So we would.
And that's what I was going to ask the board to vote on after this one as well. So yes, thank you.
Okay.
So I have a question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
How many miscellaneous articles remain open at this point in time?
I think there's 8 total. Is that correct, Chris?
There's a total of
10.
12.
Oh, 10. 12,
Yeah,
yep.
and so if two were used, we would have 10 remaining.
And, just point of order, the reason that the planning board is asking us to use one of the miscellaneous articles is obviously they had submitted their list of articles before we closed the warrant, and now the warrant is closed. The only place to accommodate this request would be the miscellaneous articles.
That's right.
Yes,
So we
that's
had requested, the planning board requested 6 zoning amendment articles. This would be a 7th zoning amendment article.
Thank you.
I'm certainly in favor of adding it based on that recommendation.
You want to make that a motion, Marianne?
I'll be happy to make that motion. I didn't know if there was any further discussion. I move that we include the planning board zoning amendment relative to major business development to the warrant.
Would we want to specify miscellaneous 1, miscellaneous 2 for the uses of Homes 2 and this planning board article?
That would be recommended.
That sounds good, Rob.
Okay.
So,
Vote them separately or together?
Would vote them
Separately.
separately.
Vote them separately. Okay, so my motion stands.
For miscellaneous number 1.
For the planning board article.
So,
Yeah.
so planning board article would be considered miscellaneous number 1. I would second that motion.
Roll call, Mary Ann,
I vote aye.
Rob,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Let's go with miscellaneous number 2.
I hereby move that we add the homes to TIF to the warrant as miscellaneous article number 2.
Second.
Roll call, Mary Ann,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about your
Thank you, Nora.
technical difficulties there, Nora. Thank you. Tell Elijah thank you too. That brings us down. Are we going to discuss the rest of these articles? Is that the game plan, Chris?
if the board would like, but there's no other changes from the last time this was presented other than the 2 the board just voted.
Great. Do you guys see any need or have any questions on anything jump out at you guys? No, I don't think so.
No.
Forgive me, but my boiler that wasn't working well this afternoon is now working really well. Working too well. Shoot.
Do we go to appointments and reappointments now? Is that?
Yeah, I'm scrolling down there, Rob, but let me just double check. Yes. Yes. So we have a board to continue its annual process of appointments. The only one I see in front of me is the Ped Bike representative of the Canton Street Project Working Group. 2024, Tom McShane was appointed to serve as the Ped Bike rep to the Canton Street Working Group. Tom has resigned from the Ped Bike Advisory Committee, and Michael Kraft, chair, has recommended that Ped Bike member Michael Tinsley serve as the Ped Bike representative on the Canton Street Working Group. Mr. Tinsley would be appointed to serve the remainder of Tom McShane's term until June 30th, 2025. Then would be reappointed as part of the board's annual appointment reappointment process. Marianne, this is your group. Anything you want to say about this?
Simply thank you to Mr. Tinsley and Mr. Kraft, the Ped Bike chair, for making this recommendation, and to Mr. Tinsley for volunteering to serve. I'd be happy to make the motion.
Please.
I move that the select board appoint Michael Tinsley as the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee representative to the Canton Street Project Working Group for a term to end on June 30, 2025.
I would second that motion.
Roll call, Marianne,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries.
And
Next
if I may,
week.
if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
let's also thank Mr. McShane for his service
Yeah.
on the committee, both the Canton Street Working Group as well as his service on the Ped Bike.
Thank you, Rob. Indeed. Thank you, Tom.
Next we have liaison reports. Do you folks have anything to report?
Just briefly, that the Commission on Disability recently met and voted to recommend to the Select Board the ADA Transition Plan, which has recently been conducted pursuant to a grant, and they will be coming to our next meeting to present that to us, representatives of the COD. So very much looking forward to that. That's
Thank
all
you.
I've got.
Yep. Rob?
No updates from you, Mr. Chair. I was not able to make the school committee meeting, school building committee meeting, or WEAC this past time around. So,
Okay. I don't have any updates as well. Next, I have regular meeting minutes, but we're going to hold off on those. That's the January 6th meeting minutes. Chris, Pat, Tish, anything before I go into our executive session script?
You have one question or statement in the question and answer section.
Tish, would you be so kind? Thank you, Pat.
Tish, you were on mute.
I'm sorry. That was Francisco. She said my question was not answered.
I'm sorry, Fran.
Do you want
Chris,
me to reread the question?
Sure.
Fran Frisco, 20 Pine Lane, trying to brainstorm on where we could save money. I want to hear from Stephanie. What is the budget for town personal vehicles? How many vehicles are in the budget? In that budget, what does that include? Gas repairs, insurance, etc. I'm not talking fire, police, chief cars. Why can't this be cut to save money? It should not be part of a personnel contract.
I don't think we can cut to vote anything without having the information. Stephanie, could you capture some of that information for us, please?
Is she talking about personal vehicles? Is that?
Town-owned vehicles.
Sorry. Energy efficient lights, it's good, but.
Now I know why you're doing that. I've got the same problem at work. I didn't know what you were doing.
So I think they're all town-owned vehicles, I just believe. Yeah, I would have to.
I think Fran's looking for a ballpark.
Okay, I'm just not sure if she means personal vehicles as far
No.
as it's
Let's leave the
dedicated to
personal
one.
vehicles out of it. Let's just look at the town-owned vehicles. And for the record, when I walk into my office at work, I go like this.
I'm just not sure what I'm researching. So is it cost and repairs to all of our vehicles that we have, or is she specifically talking about there is such thing as personal vehicles that some employees utilize? It's town-owned, but
This board does not want to go down the road of personal vehicles.
Chris, could you chime in? I don't know anything about people's contracts or what vehicles.
So I think what she's asking is, well, I don't know. Well, I don't want to assume. Town-owned vehicles that are being used by individuals who are not considered the police chief and the fire chief.
That sounds
And
okay.
those costs for repairs and fuel. And so to answer the question, any town-owned vehicle would be insured by the town. And then the repairs would be paid by the town. Many repairs can be made within the department. For example, DPW has a couple of mechanics that do that work, but the supplies would be paid for by the town.
Yeah, I can come up with a list of that. Yep, I can come up with a list of those costs.
Thank you. Are we ready for any, am I missing any questions or anything? There's something there.
Mr. Chair, I think that's the same question.
Yep, you're right, Chris. Thank you. All right. The select board, Pat, correct me if I'm premature on this. Select board will be going to executive session.
Mr. Chairman, are you going to ask if there's any other further comment from the public or press?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments from the public or the press?
I do not see any more questions.
Then at this time, the select board will be going into executive session to discuss two issues. The first, pursuant to general laws, chapter 30A, section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to potential litigation involving the property at 637 High Street. And the second, pursuant to general laws, chapter 30A, section 22FG, to comply with any general law for review of executive session minutes, both of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body. If the discussion were open session, the board will not be returning to open session. Do I have a motion?
And before we make that motion, just
Another question?
folks know we will be meeting again on Monday, February 3rd at 6 p.m. via Zoom.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
And with that, I hereby move that the select board go into executive session for the aforementioned reasons.
Second that motion.
Roll call. Mary Ann?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Stephanie, thank you so much for all your work tonight. You did a great job. I'll be seeing
Night,
the rest of
everyone.
you on the other side. Just give me a minute to check my boiler.
You got the window.